Yes, okay. All right, I'm going to call the PACAB work session into order. The topic today is to discuss renewable energy in Seward. Rob, did you want to kick it off?
Hi, Linda. Yeah, sure. I'll just give a brief update here. When I came into the job a little over a year and a half ago, we had 3 net metering customers at that time. In 2021, we added a dozen, giving us 15 total. And so far in 2022, we have added 9 more net metering customers. So that gives us a total of 24. Now, with that said, we do have another 2 that are in the queue, and so that will give us 26 total. And I think we may have another coming on. So if you look at it from that perspective, we added a dozen in 2021, and it looks like we're going to be around a dozen for 2022. So I think we're making good progress. So far, I feel like the program's going pretty well. We've got a step-by-step process outlined on our website for the electric department. We also have an application that you can fill in on the web as well. Our field work seems to be going well with the vendors that we're doing business with. The challenges that remain, I guess the biggest challenge that we have is getting our software updated to a point where we're having to do some of our billing. And I don't know if Jeremy's in the room or not, but we're having to do some of our billing manually. And that's for the customers that in some months they're producing more electricity than they're actually buying from the city. So that is an issue that we're talking to the software company. I know Jeremy's had a number of conversations. It is something that other utilities have faced when they first started doing net metering. We did a conference call a couple of months back with Homer Electric, and they experienced some of the same issues with their software that we're experiencing. So we feel like we're on the right track to go ahead and get that software updated. And once we do, then hopefully our billing issues will be rectified. But I think right now we're in a pretty good spot with the program, and things seem to be going pretty well.
Thank you. Anybody have questions for Rob? Sure.
Vice Chair Atwood. Hey Rob, this is Dwayne Atwood with the Alaska Railroad. I'm new on the board, and so anyway, I just have, I guess, a very general question in terms of net metering. Do you have essentially a credit program for those who are providing power into the grid? Is that how it works? And I guess more generally, would that be a benefit to the municipality in terms of the rate that's provided and the energy that then is provided? By rate, I mean the credits that the producers are getting. I'm just wondering if if we continue to go down this path and we get more power put into the grid. I guess, is it a net benefit to the city, or is this just a public service that we're providing?
Dwayne, hey, and it's not that we haven't met, but it is really, I guess for us, it's more of a benefit to the customers and the community. When you are a larger utility that's providing your own generation, then there's the benefit of, as customers put more energy on the grid themselves, it can delay your need to add generation to your company. So for the city of Seward, since we really do not do our own generation, we buy our power wholesale from Chugach. This is more of a community and a customer benefit at this point. And to answer your first question, and Jeremy can elaborate, but the way it's set up is when a customer's putting power on the grid, then that there's a deduction on the bill reflecting the amount of energy they're putting on, and so it does benefit them in their bill.
Well, thank you.
Anybody else have any questions for Rob?
Bruce, you want to ask Bruce?
Bruce?
I got a couple, if you can hear me.
Sure, we can.
Okay, and I need to disclose that I will be, our store downtown will eventually be one of those producers where we'll produce more power than we consume through a 12 kW solar system that we're putting in. But I think one of the things that's important is that by federal regulation, the utility is required to keep a certain amount of capacity for their market. And the city, either through their wholesale agreement or through their generation, would have to maintain that regardless as an expense. So how can those people like myself that would produce power still support or be called to still support that capital expense that the city would be required to spend? It doesn't seem fair to get completely away from it somehow. So how does the net metering consider that?
And Bruce, I'm not sure I'm really understanding your question, and I know Jeremy, I think, is in the room. He may be able to address that better than I can right now.
Well, let me break it down then, Rob. First of all, is it true that the city is required to maintain capacity for their network from whatever source? You can't get out of that responsibility if you're selling power.
If I'm understanding your question correctly, Bruce, yes, that is correct.
So if I or the 24 people who are producing power reduce your revenue, how do we still support that underlying grid?
Bruce, it works similar to, and Jeremy, jump in and correct me if I'm wrong, but it works similar to when you have people that leave Seward for the winter. There is a minimum charge that each customer is going to get. If you fall below a certain amount that you're buying from the Seward utility, there will be the system delivery charge. So that ensures that all of the interconnect customers or net metering customers are contributing to maintaining the Seward electric system. And so that's really the way that it's done at this point. I know that we're continuing our conversations with, Chugach and Homer and other companies to continue to monitor what they're doing. But, we are in a little bit different situation because we aren't a large company, and we have to monitor that pretty closely. But because of the minimum charge, all customers, even interconnect customers, are contributing to the maintenance and investment in the system.
Okay, good, thank you.
Is that it, Bruce?
Well, I guess in the long range, is there, if we continue promoting the interconnects and the renewables, is there an eventual point to where the city utility becomes its value decreases? I mean, we're considering, or the city's considering selling this, and certainly a buyer might consider whether the revenue is going to decrease and affect their bottom line. So is there a point down the road where there's too much renewable?
Yeah, I think that was a big concern for most utilities when people first started looking at adding solar and other renewable energy. behind the meter. And I think the utilities, like us with the system delivery charge, have built-in mechanisms to help them recover some revenue to ensure that there's investment. But to answer your question, Bruce, you're right. It's something that the utilities have to keep an eye on and make sure that, there is enough revenue and a revenue stream that's coming in to maintain and invest in the system appropriately. Now in Seward, we're small. We have about 2,900 meters. Today, we've got 24 net metering customers, and if we're adding about a dozen a year, I think we're a ways away from being in a position where there's tremendous, adverse impact on us. Having said that, though, it's something that we need to be keeping an eye on, and it is something that, larger utilities can absorb much better than a small utility such as ours.
Well, but speaking on that, are you aware that what the policy or what the concern is between the Home Electric or Chugach Electric? Are they're actively supporting interconnect customers?
They are. They're promoting for interconnection as well. Bruce, I think that's the direction of the world that we live in. I think more and more people are wanting to invest in renewable, and as the costs have come down, and certainly it'll even be more so as storage systems improve and those costs come down. But I think most utilities understand that this is the world we're in, and that we're going to, we need to work with customers, and we need to offer these types of programs. And at the same time, we need to be working in parallel to make sure we're managing our businesses responsibly so that we can continue to do what we need to do to invest and maintain our systems. So it is an ongoing thing that the utilities are dealing with.
Yeah, I'm glad they are. I have one last question, Rob, or maybe one last question. With the benefit to, I think, everyone with the solar interconnect metering system, and there should be, with the heat pump program, we have and I know this is not directly on the agenda, but we also have a heat pump incentive program in the city. That should increase the electrical load. Have you done any sort of an idea on balance on what might be lost with solar and what might be picked up with heat pumps? Because heat pumps require electricity. There's no question about that.
No, and Bruce too, and if I heard you correctly, because you broke up a little bit, I know that utilities, Palmer, they're now offering a heat pump incentive program. I'm assuming you're talking about for residential use, small commercial use, correct?
Well, that also, Rob, and also, the library heat pump system will be a large increase in electrical consumption, and there may be more of those.
Correct.
So,
Yeah, and
residential, yes.
Right. Yeah, and that certainly adds load to the system. Bruce, one of the challenges that we have, as far as offering an incentive program, which we are not offering from the electric utility perspective, an incentive program at this point for heat pumps. And while it's something that I think heat pumps are a viable option for customers in Seward because we don't have natural gas available, it's just not something that we're capable of offering because we don't have the manpower to do so. I think as we look to the future, and regardless of whether the utility sells or not, it's my responsibility in leading the electric utility to bring forth a structure for the electric utility. When I say structure, human resources, that I can propose because if we're going to offer these types of programs, we're going to need to increase the number of people we have so that we can manage these programs effectively. I think, most of you guys already know that even from a billing standpoint, for the most part, Jeremy's been our only billing person managing both the electric and the water sewer for the city. And that just gives you an idea of the type of issues that we will need to overcome from a human resources standpoint before we can really manage these programs effectively.
Well, that's a challenge for sure, Rob, but I think adding jobs is certainly something that I'm in favor of if we have people that are looking for work.
Well, and Bruce, sitting in the seat that I sit in, I get calls and I get visits from people in the community that would like to see us expand, some of the services and the programs that we can offer. And that goes back to the conversation around, are we better off selling the utility, or are we better off, staying as we are? But if we stay as we are, we certainly need to look at expanding and doing some things differently so we can offer more programs and services for the people.
Yeah, Rob, I'm not sure if I should direct this question to you or to Jeremy, but I really excited to hear that there are the numbers of people that are taking advantage of the net metering have increased quite a bit, and the system is starting to work now. Getting down to the nitty-gritty, I want to have an idea of how the revenue conversion works. If you produce, say, 3 kilowatts of electricity through net metering that's given back to the city or sold back to the city, what is the price on this? Is it the same as what you're charged for kilowatts you take from the city for operation? Or is there somewhat of a small reduction?
Yeah. And Jeremy, if you're there, I'll just let you answer that one.
So it's kind of a tiered system at the moment. Everybody that produces or uses more than 150 kilowatt hours per month, the difference between the delivery and the received is a 1-for-1 net amount. So depending on what the rate and the COPA are, it's a 1-for-1 exchange. If you get into 149 to 0, between what you sent us and what we sent you, the flat charges are in play. So your service delivery charge and your customer charge. Once you begin to send us more than we're sending you, then we have a rate called the avoided cost rate, which is a breakdown of, it's a formula that derives from the COPA that also takes into account the yearly estimated line loss and things like that. So it goes up and down as well. It's been as low as 5 cents and as high as almost 8. But that is the return once you drop below 0. So it's there haven't been any full credit bills, but there have been some reductions off the base rates.
Yeah, and I have some sample data here that we can go into as well.
That's it.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to make some comments or have any questions? Share your experience? Can you come up to the podium, please?
I'm Bill Hearn. I live at 327 6th Avenue. And I think I was the first one in June of 21 to get 12 solar panels. I paid about $14,800 for the 12. In the fall, Renewable Energy Systems sent me a check for $450 because they met their quota for the first summer, and So that cut it down to maybe 14.2. Then 26% of that is a tax write-off, so that took another $3,600 off. So basically, I ended up paying about $10,800. When I figured what I paid for the utility, the total utility bill the year before I got the solar panels compared to the first year with the solar panels, I saved $498. I'm 75 years old. In 21 years, I'll break even. I'll be 96. Do I have regrets? No. It's an important program. I had the money. I believe in the industry. Part of the reason is whatever I buy from the city, looking back on the bills, I paid, like Jeremy said, between 21 and 24 cents per kilowatt hour. What they have been buying back from me, they're paying between 6 and 7 cents per kilowatt hour. And it seems to be a big difference. The other things that I'll mention, the first summer, fall, and winter, I talked to Jeremy several times because I hadn't gotten a bill. And last spring, I talked to Rob, and he told me it was a software problem. And so I said, well, give me the figures, I've got a calculator, I'll figure my own bill. And so Rob said, well, let me talk to the finance director. He did, and so they've been producing manual bills. First I got 3 for the first 3 months, June 15th to July 15th, August 15th, September 15th. Everything looked fine. My kilowatt hour usage between the solar panels that I was using plus what I was buying from the city were comparable. Actually, my usage was down about 4%. And I got those bills in April or May of this year. And then the end of June, I got the rest of the 9 months. And the problem that I ran into is from October 15th to November 15th, my kilowatt hour usage was up 44%. Why? I mean, was it the weather? Did my refrigerator go on the blink and start using more electricity than it should have? Do the solar panels, when they're not being used, when they don't produce electricity, do they use electricity? But unfortunately, I didn't find out about this 44% until July of this summer. So it's maybe I couldn't have figured it out if I knew a month afterwards, but it would have been nice because it certainly raised my eyebrows. And then the next 2 months, it was up 20% over the previous year. Why? I don't know. It was a period when the solar panels were not producing electricity. So maybe if the kilowatt hour usage was consistent between the year that I didn't have the panels and the year that I did have the panels, maybe I would have saved $700 or $800. It would have cut the time down. But on the other hand, this July and this August, I'm producing barely half of what I produced last July and August because we've had so much rain and so little sun. And so this following year, I might save less than $498. I don't know. And then the last point that I'll make is I have not paid a utility bill since July of 21. And I've gotten first Jeremy had said, well, yeah, we figured out how to take your credit card. And then he said, no, we can't do it. And then I got a letter saying that we're going to charge everybody 3 weeks, every 3 weeks to get caught up. And if you want to get caught up earlier, call me and we'll let you get caught up earlier. I called him up, said, Jeremy, please charge my credit card $3,100. He said, I can't do it. And I don't understand why. I mean, I've spent a lot of years with the post office, and if somebody offers you money, first you put it in the bank and then you decide what's it for. And because it's earning interest, it's paying bills, and so there should be some kind of a trust fund. If you can't match it, if you can't match my credit card payment with a bill that's in the software system, you should be able to put it into trust, put it into miscellaneous revenue, and then when you can figure it out, it's there, you don't have to go back to the customer and say, please give me the money. And, and basically, if there's 27 of us now that have solar panels, I don't know if anybody's gotten bills, but if they hadn't, there's $100,000 that the city should have in their coffers to be using for something, and it's not there. So that's I should be counting my blessings that I'm borrowing $3,100 from the city of Seward, but I'd rather stay caught up with my monthly bills. So that's all I have.
Thanks,
Any
Bill.
questions?
Anybody have questions for him?
How's it going? I'm Dave Paperman. I think I know everybody. I guess first of all, I want to say to Rob, who I think is still on the line, I was just so happy with the process initially. It was super smooth. I think when we all started this, that we weren't sure how easy the city was going to be to work with, but the utility connection, the paperwork, all that rigmarole, no sweat. And I think that's largely because of Rob specifically. So kudos for doing a great job. And I'll also say I think Jeremy's doing a great job too. I don't mind. I wish I had better interest rate from the bank, because I use Quicken and I geek out on all this stuff. And I've kept a running total of how much I think I'm going to wind up owing the city. And I think I'm earning about 4 cents a month on that interest in my savings account, because I'm putting that aside, and I fully expect to pay for it. I got 17 panels. Mine wound up costing, after the credits and that extra little bonus from meeting our goal, I think mine cost about 14 grand, and then after the credit it was close to about 11, I believe. And my house, I'm pretty fortunate in that it's a real tall house. The roof aims dead south. There's not a tree taller than the bottom of my roof. And so I've got a great sky picture facing south. And I calculated out every month as I get those old bills, I've been calculating out the energy rate that night or that month. And if you guys want to see, I'm addicted to the little app they give you that tells you how much. It gives you cool graphs and all sorts of stuff like that. So I know how much money my panels are making on a month-to-month basis. So I could tell you, I think the last one was December 15th to January 15th. Not a very good month for solar. I think it was like $3. But when it came to July and August of last year, it was a huge amount. I still was over 150, but my bill used to be $275 or so for electric, primarily because of a hot tub and a bunch of deep freezers and stuff like that I got. I think my house now, at least in the summer months, I'm paying about as much as a small cabin for my house. So that's I've been just super pleased with it, and I geek out on the numbers, and I enjoy doing that. It's like this little math exercise I'm always doing. I was down in California last week, and I can tell the weather in Seward by looking at the graph of the day. It's like, oh, it looks like it was sunny about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. What else do I have to say? Like I said, I'm super pleased with the whole process. My geekiness, the problem that I'm going to have is just the way that it's recorded in terms of the months. So now the months are off, because I've always liked how it shows you the previous 12, and so now it's off. But I'm assuming that'll catch up at some point. Yeah, but I think it's great. I hope more people do it. I have room for a bunch more panels on my house, and we might add some more. Any other questions? Yeah.
Yes. Hi, David. Thank you for coming up and giving your testimony here on what you've got. A couple questions. Are you connected directly to the grid with no storage?
Yeah, and so Exactly, yeah, no batteries involved. And Phil Kaluza explained it, because I wasn't sure. I kind of had your question that you asked before, how does that work? And the simplest way to think of it is the way Phil described it is, the grid is my battery. So I dump, there are some days where it'll tell me I've net exported to the grid a certain amount of electricity. As long as I use that electricity that I net exported during that billing month, then that whole idea of the 4 cents or the 5 cents going below zero doesn't apply. And because of my multiple refrigerators and freezers and hot tub, that won't be a problem. When I first started looking at solar, the first company I talked to before the Solarize thing happened, they wanted me to basically cover the whole side of my house with panels, which would have virtually guaranteed I would have gone negative frequently. And going negative frequently means that you're only getting 4 cents, 5 cents, 6 cents a kilowatt hour, which does not pay. The calculation that I've been doing is I'm working at about 11 or 12 years for the replacement cost. So
I have another question. So when you say it was about 14,000 for the setup, did that include the installation or just purchase of the panels?
yeah, so the way that the Solarize program worked was there was just a flat dollar rate, and I'll try to remember the numbers. When I first went before the Solarize, I got a quote, and the quote, actually I think I got 2 quotes from different vendors. They're all in. So all the installation, the panels, the connectivity, the labor, everything except for, I think the city charged $50 for the meter change or something like that. Everything except for that. And it was, I want to say it was like $375 a watt. And so the panels are 330 watts. And so it was a little bit, about $1,200 a panel, I think is what it worked out to be. The Solarize was a group buy, same deal, all included, installation and everything. Depending on how many panels you got, it got cheaper. And I think I wound up paying about $2.30 or 40 cents. And then, like Bill said, it went down a little bit because the whole community as a whole surpassed, I think it was 100 kilowatts. And so we got a little bit of a bigger rebate. So it wound up being just over $2 for all in. And it was remarkably fast how quickly they did it. They showed up one day, and the day after they left, and it was all done. I lucked out in that there was still a meter around, and I know there were some people who waited months and months and months because the pandemic killed the meter business and they couldn't get meters. But so I lucked out on that one. The other really cool thing about my panels, my system, is they turned it on solstice. So so I have a good gauge of how effective it was on a solar year, not on a calendar year.
Thank you.
Sure.
Did you look into wind for the balance of your season out so that, like, you know, your production with solar panels drops off in the winter?
Yeah.
Wind seems to pick up in the winter somewhat.
You know, I did. I actually looked at wind before solar because I was of the kind of the common opinion that wind would be better because there's always some wind, but wintertime we don't get any sun. And I originally wanted to put a small turbine, and I talked with Mike Insulaco, and he actually found one, and you know, he was talking about how to install it, and I think it was a 5 kilowatt wind generator. I wanted to put it on the house, and he basically dissuaded me away from that just because of the vibration, and that's a challenge. He suggested that I do that, but do it on a tower behind my house. However, that would have required earthwork and stuff like that, so I have not looked at the at wind beyond that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, thanks for this information. That's really helpful. Yeah, to your point to the wind energy conversion systems, I mean, we have a provision in code for that, but there hasn't been that many takers to date. My question just goes to the equipment itself. I assume it's maintenance free and has a fairly long lifespan. I guess you're new to it, so you don't. Yeah.
So far it hasn't. I did have an issue, not with how the whole thing worked, but how it reported to the app that I use on my phone. It was just basically the system was working fine, it just wasn't reporting the right numbers. It was basically counting the energy I used and then adding the energy I generated to that. So it was looking like I was using like 100 kilowatt hours a month, when in reality I was using a little bit less than half of that. So that was one of the issues. But like I said, the system worked fine. It was just how it was recording that was a problem. And they had to switch around. They came back. The RES came by and switched around 2 of the leads, and then it worked. The other thing that's really important, and I don't know if Rob talked about it at the beginning. So when the grid goes off, my power goes off too. Even if it's bright sunny outside, the solar panels die when there's no grid power. In the past, you used to have to physically shut down the system so you don't electrocute the linemen. And so this, in terms of being maintenance free, it does that on its own. So we don't have to worry about hazard to the city crew. It just goes off. And then I believe the way it works is when the grid comes back on, it waits 15 minutes. Once it senses 15 minutes of clean power, then the panels start generating if they're seeing power or light. So.
Any issues with contractors? Are there a lot of folks doing this work?
There's a bunch, and they all, I can't remember the name of the company. When I was actually part of the Solarize group that did the RFP, and we were hoping to get several different companies bid on it, and only one did. RES was the only one that did, but their price was way better than just going straight to a company. But I looked online and found a couple of them. One of the, 2 of them came down to the house and said, in 15 minutes they basically counted the ridges of the metal roof, and they're like, you can fit this many, this is how much it's going to cost, because it's just the price is just per watt, and multiply it by 330, and that's how many watts they are. There's a couple of different kinds of panels that you can use. The panels that we got, I think, were made in Singapore, I think, and there is a company in California that makes them. We could have gotten, and I considered it quite a bit just to buy local, but it was going to add, I think it was like almost $1 per watt, so it would have been about a couple of grand more to buy the locally made ones. And they have, I know the Holes have one that's just on the ground, so the sun theoretically can bounce off the ground and hit the back of the panel. They have some panels that can catch energy from the front and the back. So there's a couple different alternatives that they could do that might be a little bit more efficient, but I didn't use those. Cool. And if anybody wants to see my app, I love sharing. I'm addicted to it. It's pretty cool.
Bruce, do you have any questions for Dave?
Not really. I really enjoy listening to the passion that this kind of thing brings to people. To get invested in knowing how much energy they're using for their washer, dryer, or hot tub. I think that's pretty cool. Hopefully that becomes infectious, and everybody gets it.
After public testimony, I have some too.
Hi, I'm Lori Landstrom. I'm also a solar panel consumer. We had 14 panels put in last summer, a 4.6 kilowatt system through the Solarize Sewer campaign. And just to expound upon that a little bit, Dave hit most of the points of that, but so this was a simultaneous community-driven campaign that happened in Homer had their group, Kenai Soldotna had their group, and we had our group here. And each community individually put out RFPs for vendors to bid on. Each community had a group, Dave was part of that evaluation group, where they evaluated the bids that then came in and selected the bid that was best for our community. RES, Renewable Energy Systems, got the bid for Seward. As Dave alluded to, they were the only bidder, but it was a very competitive price. So any of us that wanted to install through Solarize Seward only had to deal with that company, and they were guaranteed all of the customers in Seward for that campaign. So that's how they were able to make a bid, right? We had, I don't know, over 70 people that said they were interested. Well, not that many signed up, but that's also part of what these vendors know is, they're going to get X% of the people that say they're interested. So Dave was turned on in June. We hadn't even decided if we were going to do it yet at that point. I wanted a pole-mounted system because my roof is not compatible. I live in the octagon-shaped house out on Bear Lake Road. So while I thought it was going to be a great roof for my house, the vendor said, no, we'll put it on your garage roof. And I'm like, no, I don't want it on the garage roof. So I was looking at a pole-mounted system, and went round and round with that, and then finally ended up with a ground-mounted system similar to what Lynn and Roger Hull have. So our 14 panels sit on an A-frame structure in our backyard. We were one of the last to be installed in August of 21, and due to the popularity of Solarize Seward, the electric utility department had run out of meters at that point, much to their chagrin. They had ordered meters months in advance to this because they knew they were going to get an upswing in customers. We were telling them that. They ordered, supply chain issues happened, and we were late to the game, so we didn't get a meter right away. Myself and two other customers didn't get meters installed when our panels were installed. But they did a really good job of communicating with us as they tried, diligently to borrow meters from other local utilities. Utilities in the Pacific Northwest. Nobody was gonna loan them some meters, so we just had to wait. We got our meter in early of February of this year. Fortunately, November through January are not big solar producing months. So, I was happy when I got super happy when we got our meter. As you've heard, billing is an issue. It continues to be an issue. I am only up to mid-June, but Jeremy is working diligently on trying to get us caught up. I am, as Bill alluded to, getting a bill every 3 months for that month period.
Weeks.
Every 3 weeks, sorry, yes, sorry. And Jeremy told me he has to come out and hand read every solar meter. So, I don't know what the answer is to figure out this software thing, but in my mind, that's the only glitch. Because we went through the vendor we did, and part of the Solarize campaign was that we didn't have to deal with any of the paperwork. The vendor dealt with all the paperwork with the utility. We only had to be available for the electric department to come out on our property, for the vendor to come out on our property, and then for the electric department to come back. We're super happy with our panels, and we feel really good about reducing our consumption of carbon-based generated electricity. And I encourage the city to continue to research and embrace alternative energy sources and sustainable solutions for our town. Thanks.
Anybody have any questions for Lauren? Thank you. Carl?
Well, I'm going to give you my testimony as a PACAB member. I have embraced the solar power concept myself. Me and Bruce are doing similar projects with the exception that mine will be off the grid. He has purchased, I think, 24 panels, and so have I. They're approximately 330 watts each, capable of generating 12 kW. I have also bought the controller charger option to run that system, but I have to be off the grid, so I will have to work on storage, and that's the most expensive part of it. A Fortress battery is about 12K, and minimum of 2 to really run a system. But I've had a workshop storage area for my business designed by Nelson Engineering, and the roof is designed to carry all 24 panels. And eventually we could try wind generation in. A little kudo for everybody: if you're up at 100 feet with your wind generator, there's always wind there. But anyway, Bruce can speak to his own system. I'm actually excited to see his operational, so I can go check it out, you know.
I guess I'll go ahead and share my experience with this project. So we tried to get in on the push that happened in 2021, but I don't think renewable energy was able to handle as many people as wanted it in 21. So ours didn't get installed until this year. So luckily, I'm just finding out today that I have money I owe, because I don't know if any of you have seen it. I'll hold this one up, but this is what the hand-generated or manually generated bills look like. And what I just noticed while I'm sitting here is there's down at a note at the bottom, auto pay. Well, now this one says, wait a minute. Okay, so they say different things. The first one said auto pay should run while bills are manually generated, but the most recent one says auto pay will not run while bills are automatically generated or manually generated. So I have this year and last year's bill for the same period. In June to July of last year, we paid $105.68. And this year we paid $73.10, because we're in the category of people that we're not producing over 150. So basically, we're not paying for any energy, we're just paying for infrastructure. The way I look at it is we're paying for infrastructure bills. The delivery charge, the customer charge, and taxes this is the only thing that are on these bills. And they're both identical, because we're not producing more than 150 per month.
That's still a 30% reduction.
Right. And then the second bill, the July to August bill, last year it was $109.27, and again, this year it's just the base of $73.10. So we're saving money. And the interesting thing about this, though, is that this also represents a heat pump in this setup, because one of the buildings attached to this meter has a heat pump that we put in this year as well. I have a couple of questions for Rob, probably. What are the thoughts on the new subdivision that's being proposed up on the bench? We're talking about like 650 or so houses being built. If that moved forward, would you anticipate that the electric department would incorporate solar into their transmission to that location?
So Linda, I guess what you're asking is, as part of what we're producing or what's produced for sewers, would there be solar mixed in? Am I getting your question correctly?
Yes.
As I think we buy our power from Chugach. So really, whatever their renewable energy mix is, we benefit from that as well. And as part of our wholesale power supply contract with Chugach, there's language in there that talks about that our community should benefit from renewable energy just as any of their customers do. So from that perspective, we are putting renewable energy on the grid in Seward through Chugach. And yet, since we do not provide our own generation, for us to do anything from a solar perspective, it's not something that we've looked at. There are community solar projects that are done, around the country. I'm not sure how many have been done in Alaska. Is that an option that a city like Seward could look at in the future? Possibly, as long as the cost could be offset through either grants or paid for through the actual development of the community. So are those options that we would look at? Sure, we would look at them. But we got to make sure that financially what we do is feasible, because we do run such a tight budget, with the city. And we would have to find ways of helping offset any costs that we put or revenues that we put into such a project.
Okay. And can you clarify something for us? There's a sense in the community that, or there has been in the past, I think it's changed some since you've been here, but there is a sense in the community among some people that the utility is the cash cow for the city. And I've sat in meetings with you where I'm quite sure I've heard you say that that's really not the case. So I really wonder, how much revenue are we looking at giving up, and how is that going to interfere with the utility's ability to survive financially?
Sure. No, and good question. The city does benefit from having the electric, as far as the general fund contribution that the electric department's been making. To give you an example, in 2021, the electric department paid to the general fund $2.1 million. Of that, $1.1 million of that was a payment in lieu of taxes, and another $1 million was a transfer fee for administrative services such as billing, human resources, accounts payable, receivable, so on and so forth. So the city is making, or the electric department is making that contribution to the city's general fund. Now, one thing that I have pointed out to the council is that as the city's electric department, the utility, we invest in the system the way we should be. That's both the infrastructure and the technology. We are so far behind on technology that it's going to take a lot to catch up. There's no guarantee that we could make that same type of contribution to the general fund as we move forward. Because we do need to be investing back into our system, and for whatever reason, maybe it wasn't invested in as it should have been in the past. But that general fund contribution that we've been making is certainly not guaranteed. And Jeanette, the city manager, as all of you know, she's made that same comment as well. It's not a guaranteed contribution that we make. So could we make that going forward? I don't know. If we're doing what we should be, we may not be making that type of contribution to the city. So there is the perception that the electric department has been a cash cow and has carried the city. We've made a good contribution to the city. I wouldn't necessarily call it a cash cow, but in my comments around the whole conversation of selling the utilities, one thing that I have said is that it's important as we look at whatever utility we're talking to, that we have some ways to offset the type of contribution the electric department has been making to the city. And so I think, for the city just to sell to another utility without taking that into consideration would not be prudent. I think that if we were to sell to another utility, there should be some sort of transition plan in place to ensure that there is a financial offset that can help the city through that transitional period.
Thank you. Thank you. I think you made an excellent point in that, you know, it's one thing to have been making contributions to the general fund over the, you know, past 30, 50 years, whatever. But if we haven't been also making contributions to keeping the infrastructure in shape and growing, then, you know, maybe all that money that went into the general fund, it was a good thing in one way, but at the same time, now the utility's behind in terms of maintenance and things like that.
Yeah, and to add on to the point, you know, the other thing that because the investments in the infrastructure haven't been made consistently, you know, we're looking at if we start paying off the bond that we've taken out for the infrastructure projects over the next few years, we start making that full payment in 2024. We are, in the electric utility, we're looking at implementing, doing a rate study in 2023 with plans to implement a rate increase in 2024. And in looking at that rate increase, just based on some preliminary numbers I'm looking at, it could be a double-digit type of increase. Now, again, that's very preliminary and that's very rough at this point. But there's the perception that, you know, rates, so we can keep rates low and that sort of thing. And, you know, we will do everything we can to be responsible and keep our rates low, but with the understanding that we have to do certain things in the utility industry. It's a very complex industry to stay up with our infrastructure and to stay up with technology. And as we make those investments go back into the rates. So I would, you know, expect to see our rates for customers going up certainly over the next few years.
Okay, I have another question. Has the utility ever considered, now that we have these options of renewable, beginning to create or produce some of our own power in addition to purchasing from Chugach?
You know, it's something that, you know, we've had conversations about. It's not anything that we've been able to seriously consider in the time that I've been with the utility, because so much of our focus has been on catching up on the infrastructure and doing those type of things. I think if the city were to ever look at any type of generation, it would have to be certainly a small type of project with an investment that could be manageable. And I think that the only way the city could really go down that path is to have funding that comes in, you know, to help, whether it's matching type funding, a grant, or whether it's, you know, working with a developer in a community, such as you mentioned over on the SMIC bench. You know, those are the type of things. It's not something the city would be able to financially do on its own.
Okay, thank you. So what else at this point? In our packet, we've got the application for interconnect. I think I just want to give voice to say thank you to Rob for the great progress that has been made on this project in the last couple of years since you've gotten here. It felt like we were really spinning our wheels, and I feel like we've moved forward and we've accomplished something. So what next? I mean, is anybody other?
Linda?
Yeah, go ahead.
If I could, I would like to say one last thing. You know, I think we've done pretty well with the interconnect program, and we moved pretty quickly to get it up and running. I think our work in the field, as David indicated, has gone pretty well for the most part. But I do want to apologize to the interconnect customers that have had an issue with the billing. I've talked on the phone several times with Bill Hearn, and I think Bill will tell you that I have apologize to him directly, and I apologize to all the customers that have had an issue. It's our responsibility as the electric utility to get these things right. At the end of the day, that comes back and directly on me. And so I can assure you that we've had conversations, with the software company. We've talked to other utilities to see if they experience similar problems, and they have when they first started this. But, I had a conversation just yesterday with the deputy finance director, and we have committed to each other that we're going to move this forward as quickly as possible, because we shouldn't be operating manually to do billing when we're in 2022. But I just wanted to say I apologize for those issues. Hopefully we will have them resolved in the very near future, and we will keep you posted.
So along that line, I guess I have a question. Why can't someone just take one of these manual bills and bring payment to the city?
And I'm going to defer to Mr. Jeremy on that one.
So currently, the net metering is affecting all phases of the utility. So the reading, the billing, and the collecting. So right now, people can come in and manually pay.
Okay.
But the collection system that we use for the radio acquisition is it's only pulling in one of the reads. So it will pull in the first delivered read. But when we go to apply it, it takes that same read and puts it into the received and the net, and then totals them all together. So it tries to bill somebody 6,000 kilowatt hours, which we believe will be dealt with the upgrade, because not only are we upgrading the Harris billing system, we're upgrading the Itron collection system, and the Paymentus side is also being upgraded to catch up. The payment side, I am not able to tell you why it's not working. We're having conversations with them, and actually I'm using Bill as my test subject. The way the manual billing is done, it's listed on the account as a miscellaneous billing adjustment. This same type of adjustment is being used on other accounts that are working just fine. I can't get one of the auto pays to run on any of the manual bills. The problem there is we don't hold the information. Paymentus is a third party that we use, and they hold the information. At no point can we push them to run a card. So we talk to them, and we're working. They say they send, all the accounts send what they call like coins. And we've got a record every day of all the information being sent. It's just not, it's not connecting on the dates that these people want their cards run. And it's not something I can explain. But the hope is that as each tier is upgraded, a lot of this will start to come together. The billing works normally for everybody unless they send more power to us. That's where the breakdown happens. And then once they do that, I have to continually bill it manual.
Right.
And until I can get it fixed to where it's actually coming in and billing right, once that happens, then I can take the meter off of the account. I can plug in the numbers that are current, and then I can reattach it, and then we'll be moving forward perfectly. A lot of the delays came, just like Rob pointed out, I've kind of been a little shorthanded. A lot of my last year and early this spring were taken up with forensic and internal auditing, and I just didn't have anybody to lean on. So net metering is what got left behind. And now that we got clear of the auditing and things like that, net metering's pretty much got my full attention. And I can tell you it's very cool. I'm enjoying it. I'd like it to work better. But, so I put together a couple of spreadsheets, which, just for my own sense, but to pass on to you guys. In 2021, with the number of solar customers, which I believe was at 15, they produced onto our grid 11,800 kilowatt hours. This year, up until September 15th, we've collected 36,000 and change kilowatt hours. So we've more than tripled that with what's coming back onto the grid. Right now, the benefit to what we are pulling in does slightly affect the COPA, just a little bit. It's a small number, but the COPA goes down to the thousandths of a point. So there is a little bit of savings as that power is being sent back to us, and the less that's being sent from Chugach. So it is affecting the COPA ever so slightly, but as more people get on, you know, that will also be a nice little bonus as well.
So someone with a bill, like me, I've got 2 bills now that haven't actually been paid. I could come in and write you a check and give it to you, and...
Yeah, and we can take card at the counter, we can take check, cash.
Okay,
I just can't get it to do it automatically.
automatically.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
okay. Okay, so that's the same for anybody else out there that's sitting on bills. There's no reason not to pay them. You just can't pay them through
Right.
the traditional method.
Right.
Okay.
And then on top of that, you know, with everything dragging out, you know, we're not putting any pressure on anybody. You know, we're trying to be as easy to work with as possible.
Right,
You know?
right,
So,
right.
of course, there's no late letters, there's no late
Right,
fees.
right.
We're just, you know, we're trying to get it right.
Right. I appreciate that. I think that's great.
I can add one thing, and maybe Jeremy can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the credit card can only take a certain amount. You can't take huge amounts, if I remember right. I know we had a problem down the harbor that way. Couldn't take huge amounts on the credit card.
Yeah, so if somebody's run up, you know, $3,000-$4,000,
Right.
they may have to make several payments to get
Correct.
caught up if they want to do it on a card.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the manual side, we do have a limit of 3,000 to run in
Right.
the office. On the auto pay side, it's much higher.
Right,
Since we're not touching it, and
Right.
it's the third party, I believe that cap is 25,000.
right,
So,
right.
but if I can get that auto pay working, we'll be
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions or comments, or, Bill?
Can I make one?
Sure.
Nothing to do with the city, but when I first got hooked up, I had Alaska Wi-Fi, no problem. And then when I had to switch to Yukon TV, I had to switch to GCI Wi-Fi, and my solar panels stopped communicating. So I spent a few hours in the wind and the rain, outside my garage, on the phone with somebody from Idaho, trying to get my solar panels to communicate. Wouldn't work. So finally the guy said, well, your router needs to be closer to the garage. So Nick from GCI comes over again, moves the router from the living room, drills a hole in my middle bedroom, puts the router in the bedroom, and I spent a few more hours on the phone in the wind and the rain, trying to get my solar panels to communicate, and they wouldn't do it. So finally, somebody told me, Alaska has 2.4 gig,
Right,
GCI has 5 gig, and my panels, maybe it's only my panels, don't communicate with 5
5
gig.
gig, right.
So I called GCI switched me back to 2.4, even though I'm paying $115 a month more for 5 gig, but my solar panels are communicating. And I guess with a Google Mesh router, I can get 5 gigs on my desktop, and I can get 2.4 on it. But that's something that a consumer may run into and not know what the problem is, but it's the 2.4.
No, I appreciate you bringing that up, because I think that I've had that same issue Because we have, and actually tell Alaska, depending on the router you have, it'll produce both. So I have a router that's producing both a 2-point whatever and then a 5-point, but it will only talk on the 2-point. Yeah, good point.
I just had a couple of things to add for you guys' knowledge. Out of all the solar panels, there is one customer that has batteries, 2 of them. He basically collects during the day, and then he shuts his house off at night and runs off the batteries. And the second tidbit was, currently these 330 watt, I think the industry calls them, or 400 watt or something like that, they call them. But now in Canada, there are 800 watt panels being
Canada Solar.
being produced. So one good thing about everybody that does have, and maybe we're maybe just a little ahead of the game, the amount of technology that's changed in the last even 10 years in solar has, tripled. But everybody that has this setup in already will benefit with the fact that you will upgrade to smarter panels as you go along. And I think that's going to reduce a lot of people's idea in what they'll actually have to recover.
Right.
So,
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
In response to what Jeremy just told you, not only that, but the price of solar panels have come down. My total system with control was only $12,000.
yeah.
Right. Yeah, and it's helpful to know that there is one person using a battery backup, because that's what, eventually, I think a lot of people will expand their system so they have a little more independence.
Yeah. Yeah. And, that's one of those cases. Obviously, the cost is high, but you're using your power.
Right.
Which is another, he's talking about getting an electric car.
Right.
He can plug in and he can pull his power off of his battery.
Right.
For his car.
Right.
So.
Right. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, thank you.
Anything else? Any last comments? Or thank you, Rob, for being here. Thank you, Bruce, for being here remotely. I think that this is it's good that we did a summary. It's good to know where things stand. It's good to know there's billing issues still. And it's good to know that we've really moved quite along. And so that crumpled up can that Phil Calusa kept bringing up to the dais, we got rid of that. We're not kicking that down the road anymore. And with that, I will conclude our work session at 1:17.